The words fell from Helena Reynolds' lips like stones. She stood motionless at the top of the marble staircase, watching the silver Audi pull up to the valet stand. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne flute, knuckles whitening with pressure, even from a distance. She recognized his posture, the way James tilted his head slightly when he laughed, the familiar gesture of his hand adjusting his tie. 15 years of marriage had etched his mannerisms into her memory like grooves in vinyl, but it was the woman beside him who commanded Helena's attention. Tall and willowy in a fitted burgundy gown, she moved with the easy confidence of someone who believed she belonged. Helena watched as James placed his hand on the small of the woman's back, an intimate gesture he'd once reserved for her. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia whispered beside her. Her oldest friend had flown in from Chicago specifically for this moment, had helped Helena select the midnight blue gown that now draped her body like liquid shadow. "I've never been more certain of anything," Helena replied, her voice steady despite the violent hammering of her heart. She took a measured sip of champagne, savoring its crisp bite against her tongue. 3 months of planning. I'm not backing out now. The Hawthorne estate gleamed beneath the September sun, its manicured gardens and stone terraces providing a perfect backdrop for the society wedding of the year. As Chief Donor Relations Officer for the Sinclair Foundation, Helena had secured her invitation months ago. James, however, hadn't known she would be attending, just as she hadn't known he would bring her. "Remember, whatever happens," Olivia started. "I know." Helena cut her off with a slight shake of her head. "I've got a car waiting. I've got a place to stay. I've got you." She squared her shoulders. "Now shall we?" She descended the staircase with deliberate grace, her gaze fixed on the entrance where James would soon appear. The revenge she'd planned wouldn't involve screaming or scene-making. No, Helena had crafted something far more devastating. She had chosen truth as her weapon. And she had brought receipts. 6 months earlier. "You're working late again?" Helena cradled the phone between her ear and shoulder as she stirred the pasta sauce simmering on the stove. "Can't be helped." James's voice carried the familiar strain of apology mingled with impatience. "The Singapore merger is falling apart. Marcus needs all hands on deck." Helena glanced at the dining table she'd set for two, complete with candles and the Barolo they'd brought back from their Tuscany trip 3 years ago. Their anniversary dinner, their 15th, now destined to be eaten alone. "It's our anniversary," she said quietly. A beat of silence. "Shit! Helena, I'm sorry, it's fine." She turned off the burner, suddenly not hungry. "We can celebrate this weekend." "Absolutely. I promise I'll make it up to you." His voice softened with what sounded like genuine regret. "I'll book Oriole. The full tasting menu." "Sounds perfect." She managed to keep her tone light. "Love you. Love you too. See you later tonight." After hanging up, Helena stared at the meal she'd spent hours preparing. 15 years condensed to a rain check and cooling pasta. She uncorked the wine anyway and poured herself a generous glass. Their marriage hadn't always been this way. The early years had been a whirlwind of ambition and mutual support, James climbing the ranks at Weston Financial, while Helena built the donor program at Sinclair from the ground up. They'd been partners, equals, each other's biggest champions. Somewhere along the way, that balance had shifted. The promotion to senior partner had changed something in James. The 70-hour weeks, the constant travel, the endless networking events had created a gradual distance that Helena couldn't seem to bridge. She'd told herself it was temporary, that all marriages went through phases. Tonight, however, the empty chair across from her felt less like a phase and more like a glimpse of her future. She was halfway through her second glass when her phone pinged with a notification. An email from American Express. A charge alert for dinner at Maison, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. 347.82 as Helena frowned. She knew James's schedule nearly as well as her own, a habit from years of coordinating their lives. He was supposed to be at the office with Marcus, not at Maison. Her finger hovered over the phone. She could call him, of course, but something held her back. Instead, she opened the browser on her laptop and logged into their joint credit card account. The transaction details showed dinner for two. 2 craft cocktails, wine pairings, the chef's tasting menu. Dinner ordered at 7:04 p.m., less than 15 minutes after he'd called to cancel their anniversary plans. Helena sat very still, the implications crystallizing in her mind like ice. She'd always prided herself on not being the suspicious wife who checked receipts and questioned late nights. She trusted James, had trusted him. Her fingers moved to their shared calendar app. For the past few months, James had been diligent about logging his work commitments, client dinners, late meetings, business trips. With clinical detachment, Helena began cross-referencing his calendar events with their credit card statements. A pattern emerged with devastating clarity. Charges at hotels when he was supposedly at conferences, dinner reservations that didn't align with client names, weekend trips to wine country when he'd told her he was visiting his mother in Phoenix. By midnight, Helena had compiled a spreadsheet of discrepancies spanning 6 months. The woman sitting at her dining table was no longer the trusting wife of 15 years, but an investigator meticulously documenting betrayal. When James came home at 1:38 a.m., she was waiting in the darkened living room, the spreadsheet closed, her face composed. "You're still up." He loosened his tie, setting his briefcase by the door. "How was your evening?" "Quiet." Helena studied his face, searching for signs of guilt or hesitation. "How was the office? Did you and Marcus make progress?" James ran a hand through his hair, his wedding band catching the dim light. "Some. The paperwork is a nightmare. We'll have to revisit it tomorrow." The lie slipped from his lips with practiced ease. Helena felt something fundamental shift inside her. Not breaking, but hardening, like metal forged in fire. "I saved you some pasta," she said, rising from the sofa. "It's in the fridge if you're hungry." "Thanks, but I grabbed something at the office." Another lie. "I'm exhausted." "Coming to bed?" "In a bit." He kissed her cheek, a gesture so familiar it now felt like a stranger's touch, and headed upstairs. Helena remained in the living room, her mind racing ahead, planning, calculating. She wouldn't confront him. Not yet. First, she needed to understand the full scope of his deception. And then, she would decide exactly how to dismantle the life he'd built on lies. The first time Helena saw them together was 3 weeks later, at Riverstone Park. She'd taken a half-day off work, ostensibly to prepare for a foundation gala, but actually to follow James after he'd mentioned a lunch meeting downtown. There was no meeting. Instead, James met a woman at the park's eastern entrance, tall, elegant, early 30s. Even from a distance, Helena could see she was beautiful, with dark hair cut in a sleek bob and a confident stride that spoke of self-assurance. They embraced with the easy intimacy of established lovers, and Helena felt the sharp stab of confirmation. She watched them from behind oversized sunglasses, cataloging details with surprising calm. The way the woman tucked her hand into the crook of James's arm. How he leaned down to whisper something that made her laugh. The matching coffee cups they carried as they strolled along the riverfront. Helena took photos discreetly, not out of some misguided plan for confrontation, but because she needed tangible proof to counteract the gaslighting she anticipated. Then she followed at a safe distance, tracking them to a luxury apartment building in Westbridge, a neighborhood of young professionals and upscale amenities. The doorman greeted James by name. Helena returned to her car, hands steady despite the churning in her stomach. She opened her laptop and pulled up their financial records. After methodical searching, she found it. A separate credit card statement she hadn't known existed, linked to their joint account, but with statements directed to James's private email. The transactions told their own story. Monthly payments to the Westbridge Property Management Company dating back 8 months. Jewelry purchases, weekend getaways, a life running parallel to their marriage. That night, when James called to say he'd be working late, Helena responded with practiced concern about his heavy workload. She suggested he take a weekend off soon. Self-care was important after all. "That's why I love you," he'd said warmly. "Always looking out for me." Always, Helena had agreed. Her voice gentle with what James would interpret as affection rather than promise. Over the following weeks, Helena built her case with the precision she normally reserved for the Foundation's most delicate donor negotiations. She documented James's absences, photographed the woman, whose name she discovered was Alessandra Reyes, a marketing executive at a firm that occasionally partnered with Weston Financial. She tracked payments, locations, patterns, but most importantly, she crafted her plan. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a gold-embossed invitation that arrived at their home on a Tuesday morning. The wedding of Philip Hawthorne, son of Weston Financial's founder, to Elise Chen at the historic Hawthorne estate. James had mentioned the upcoming nuptials months ago, a significant social event for the firm, attendance all but mandatory for senior partners. Helena had nodded with appropriate interest, never letting on that she too had received an invitation through her work with the Sinclair Foundation, which had partnered with the Hawthorne family on several philanthropic initiatives when James announced he'd be attending alone due to Helena's supposed scheduling conflict with a foundation event, a conflict that didn't actually exist. She knew she had found her stage. That's unfortunate timing, she'd said, watching his face for signs of relief. You'll have to tell me all about it afterward. Of course. He'd kissed her forehead. Though these things are usually tedious without you. The wedding was 6 weeks away. Helena had preparations to make. Helena Reynolds? The voice carried genuine surprise. Helena turned to find Catherine Hawthorne, the mother of the groom, approaching with outstretched hands. What a delight to see you. I didn't realize you were attending. Last-minute change of plans. Helena accepted Catherine's embrace with practiced warmth. I couldn't miss Philip's big day. The gardens look absolutely magical. James mentioned you couldn't make it due to a foundation commitment, Catherine said, her expression curious. Did he? Helena's smile remained perfectly in place. There must have been some confusion. Is he here yet? I've been caught up greeting everyone. I haven't seen him, but the ceremony doesn't start for another hour. Catherine lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between us, I'm hiding from the wedding planner. The woman is terrifying. Helena laughed, the sound natural despite the tension coiling inside her. Your secret is safe with me. They chatted briefly about the Foundation's upcoming winter gala before Catherine was pulled away by a relative. Helena moved through the gathering crowd with practiced social grace, accepting a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server and positioning herself where she could monitor the main entrance. Olivia rejoined her, elegant in emerald green. You're the picture of composure, she murmured. I'd be climbing the walls. 15 years in nonprofit development, Helena replied. I can smile through anything. Have you decided exactly what you're going to say? Helena's gaze remained fixed on the entrance. I'm going to let the situation dictate the specifics. But the essence? Her voice hardened slightly. I'm going to introduce myself as his wife to his girlfriend, and then I'm going to watch while he explains to both of us why he's been living a double life. And afterward? Afterward, I walk away. Helena turned to her friend, her expression resolute. Whether he begs, threatens, or breaks down, I walk away with my dignity intact. He can have the public humiliation and the consequences. Olivia squeezed her arm. I've got the car keys. Just give me the signal if you need an exit. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of greetings and small talk. Helena moved through conversations on autopilot, her attention divided between social pleasantries and the entrance. And then, suddenly, he was there. James looked handsome in his tailored gray suit, his dark hair touched with distinguished silver at the temples. Alessandra stood beside him in burgundy silk, her hand resting comfortably in the crook of his arm as they presented their invitation to the attendant. Helena watched as they passed through the entrance, James nodding to colleagues, introducing Alessandra with practiced ease. They looked like a couple, comfortable, connected, legitimate. The sight sent a wave of cold clarity through Helena's veins. She set down her champagne glass on a nearby table and smoothed her hands over the midnight blue silk of her gown. That's her? Olivia asked quietly. Yes. Helena's voice was calm. And now it's time to make introductions. James felt good. The Hawthorne-Chen wedding represented more than a social obligation. It was an opportunity to solidify his position within Weston Financial's inner circle. With Alessandra beside him, radiant and sharp-witted, he looked every inch the successful senior partner. She understood this world, knew how to navigate these waters with the same intuitive grace that had first drawn him to her. "The Hawthorne estate is even more impressive than you described," Alessandra murmured, taking in the historic mansion and its sprawling grounds. "Wait until you see the ballroom." James guided her through the crowd, nodding to colleagues and clients. Prohibition-era crystal chandeliers imported from France. He felt a momentary twinge of guilt at bringing Alessandra to such a public event. It was riskier than their usual meetings, but Helena was safely occupied with her foundation work across town. Besides, most of his colleagues assumed he was separated or divorced, a misconception he'd never bothered to correct. James Mercer. A booming voice cut through his thoughts. Marcus Townsend, fellow senior partner and the closest thing James had to a friend at the firm, approached with his wife. "And this must be Alessandra. James speaks highly of you." "All good things, I hope," Alessandra replied smoothly, extending her hand. "Only the best." Marcus winked. "James here never shuts up about you." They fell into easy conversation about the firm's recent victories, the upcoming Singapore merger, office politics. James relaxed into the familiar rhythm, his hand resting comfortably at Alessandra's waist. James. The voice behind him, soft, controlled, and unmistakable, sent ice through his veins. He turned slowly, already knowing what he would find. Helena stood before him in a midnight blue gown that accentuated every curve, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She looked stunning, and completely out of place in his carefully compartmentalized life. "Helena," he managed, his voice strangled. "What are you doing here?" Her smile was serene. "Attending a wedding. Same as you." Her gaze shifted to Alessandra, who was watching the exchange with confusion. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Helena Reynolds, James's wife." The silence that followed was absolute. James felt the ground tilt beneath his feet as his two separate worlds collided catastrophically. Marcus and his wife exchanged alarmed glances and discreetly stepped away, leaving James exposed in the crossfire of his own making. Alessandra's expression transformed from confusion to shock to dawning horror. "Wife?" She looked between them, the color draining from her face. "You're married?" "Alessandra," James started, but Helena cut him off. 15 years next month, actually, she continued pleasantly, as though discussing the weather. "Though James has been rather busy lately. Work commitments, you understand. Singapore merger and all that." Recognition flashed in Alessandra's eyes. "The Singapore merger," she repeated flatly. "The one that's kept you working late for months. The reason you couldn't spend weekends together?" James felt sweat beading at his hairline. "This isn't the place." "You're right," Helena agreed, her composure unwavering. "The Hawthorne estate is hardly the venue for such a conversation. Perhaps we should step into the garden? I'd hate to disturb the other guests." Without waiting for a response, she turned and moved toward a secluded section of the terrace, leaving James no choice but to follow. Alessandra trailed behind, her face a mask of stunned betrayal. In a private corner of the garden, partially screened by ornamental hedges, Helena finally turned to face them both. "How long have you known?" James asked, his voice low. "About your affair?" 6 months. Helena's calm was unnerving. "About Alessandra specifically?" 3 months. "About the apartment in West Bridge?" "The credit card you thought I didn't know about?" "The weekend trips to wine country when you were supposedly visiting your mother?" "All of it, James. I know all of it." Alessandra's shock had hardened into anger. "Is this true? You've been living with your wife while telling me you were separated and finalizing a divorce?" James felt trapped between two fires. "It's complicated." "No," Helena interrupted, her voice finally betraying a hint of emotion. "It's actually quite simple. You've been lying to both of us." She reached into her clutch and removed a small folder, which she handed to Alessandra. "Hotel receipts, credit card statements, photos, The lease agreement for the West Bridge apartment, which, by the way, is paid for with our joint funds. I thought you might want to see the evidence. Alessandra opened the folder, her hands trembling slightly as she scanned the contents. 2 years, she said quietly, looking up at James. You told me you'd been separated for 2 years. Just finalizing paperwork. There's more, Helena continued, her focus entirely on Alessandra now. The diamond earrings he gave you for your birthday? Purchased with our anniversary trip fund. The weekend in Napa? That was the same weekend he told me he was at a conference in Chicago. James felt his professional facade crumbling. Helena, please. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Helena told Alessandra, ignoring James completely. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. Whatever he's promised you, whatever future he's described, it's built on lies. Alessandra closed the folder and handed it back to Helena. Her face had settled into a cold mask of dignity. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. I assume you've known about the pregnancy as well? The words hung in the air like smoke. Helena's composure finally cracked, her eyes widening as she turned to James. Pregnancy? She whispered. James felt the world collapsing around him. He had only learned about it himself last week. Alessandra's cautious announcement over dinner, her uncertainty about what it meant for their relationship. He'd promised to support her, to accelerate his divorce plans, to build a future together, all lies built on older lies. 12 weeks, Alessandra confirmed, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, still flat beneath the burgundy silk. He told me he would tell his soon-to-be ex-wife about us after the wedding. That we would make it official. Helena took a step back, absorbing this new information. For the first time, James saw genuine pain break through her controlled exterior. I didn't know, she said softly. I'm sorry. The simple apology, offered to Alessandra rather than demanded from James, seemed to shift something in the atmosphere between the two women. A shared recognition of betrayal that transcended their differences. Well, Alessandra said after a moment, squaring her shoulders, it seems we have both been deceived. She turned to James, her expression hardening. Don't call me. Don't come to the apartment. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the child. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her burgundy gown a streak of color against the manicured green of the garden. James moved to follow, but Helena's voice stopped him. Let her go, James. He turned to face his wife, 15 years of shared history hanging between them like a weight. You had no right, he said, anger finally breaking through his shock. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. You destroyed my relationship. You destroyed your relationship, Helena corrected him, her voice steady once more. Both relationships, in fact. I merely exposed the truth. What do you want, Helena? Money? The house? Is this some kind of elaborate negotiation tactic? She looked at him for a long moment, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. I don't want anything from you anymore, James. That's the point of all this. I'm setting myself free. From her clutch, she removed a second folder, thicker than the first, and handed it to him. Inside, he found divorce papers, already completed with details of their assets, property, and financial accounts. You'll find everything is quite fair, Helena said quietly. I'm not interested in punishing you financially. I just want out. James stared at the documents, the magnitude of what was happening finally sinking in. You planned all of this? Yes. There was no triumph in her voice, only certainty. Once I understood what was happening, I decided I wouldn't be the wife who screams or throws things or begs you to stay. I decided I would be the woman who walks away on her own terms. And what about us? James asked, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. 15 years, Helena. Doesn't that count for something? It counted for everything, she replied softly. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply. But I'm not interested in salvaging what we had. Some broken things should remain broken. In the distance, music swelled as guests began moving toward the ceremony location. Helena glanced in that direction, then back at James. I won't be staying for the wedding, she said. I've made quite enough of a scene for one day. The papers don't need to be signed immediately. Take some time to review them with your lawyer. She reached out and straightened his tie, a gesture so familiar it sent a pang of loss through his chest. Goodbye, James. As she turned to walk away, James felt the sudden, overwhelming certainty that he was losing something irreplaceable. Helena, wait! She paused but didn't turn around. I did love you, he said, the words inadequate even to his own ears. For whatever that's worth now. Helena looked over her shoulder, her expression a complex mixture of sadness and resolution. It was worth everything once. Now it's just a sentence in our history. She offered him one last smile, gentle, almost compassionate. Take care of yourself, James. And whatever you decide about Alessandra and the baby, try to be honest this time. He watched her walk away, elegant in midnight blue, her head held high. Across the lawn, he spotted her meeting a woman in emerald green, a friend he didn't recognize, who handed her a car key with a supportive embrace. James remained in the garden, divorce papers in hand, as guests filtered past toward the ceremony he could no longer bring himself to attend. In the space of 20 minutes, the carefully constructed dual life he'd built had collapsed entirely, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his own making. 3 months later, Helena set the last box on the kitchen counter and surveyed the apartment. Her apartment, with satisfaction. Sunlight streamed through the wall of windows, illuminating the hardwood floors and the minimalist furniture she'd selected to furnish her new life. After the confrontation at the Hawthorne estate, she had stayed with Olivia for several weeks while finding this place, a modern loft in an up-and-coming arts district, as different from the suburban home she'd shared with James as possible. Today marked the final stage of her move, the last physical separation from her old life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Everything unloaded? Need help unpacking? Helena smiled as she typed her response. All set. Just opening wine? Come by later? A moment later? Wouldn't miss it. 7 p.m. works? Perfect. Helena set down her phone and opened the box marked Kitchen Essentials. Inside, nestled among plates and glasses, she found the small wooden box that contained her grandmother's handwritten recipe cards, one of the few sentimental items she'd brought from the old house. As she lifted it out, her wedding ring, removed weeks ago and tucked away, clinked against the wood. She hesitated before opening the box and looking at the platinum band that had adorned her finger for 15 years. It represented a chapter of her life that had ended, painfully, yes, but also definitively. Without regret, she placed it back in the box and returned it to its place among her treasures. Not to wear again, but to remember. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency. James, perhaps out of guilt or simply wanting to move forward, had agreed to her terms without contesting anything. Their last communication had been through lawyers, an anticlimactic end to 15 years of shared life. Helena had heard through mutual connections that James had taken a leave of absence from Weston Financial. Rumor had it he was trying to reconcile with Alessandra, though with what success Helena didn't know. She found, somewhat to her surprise, that she genuinely hoped they worked things out. The child deserved parents who could move beyond the wreckage of lies. As for Helena herself, she had emerged from the collapse of her marriage with unexpected clarity. The foundation had offered her a promotion, Director of Strategic Partnerships, a position that would allow her to expand the work she found meaningful. She had accepted immediately. Her phone pinged again with another message, this time from an unfamiliar number. When she opened it, she found a meeting request from David Chen, the renowned architect whose firm had recently partnered with the Sinclair Foundation on a community arts center. They had met briefly at a fundraising event last month and had spoken at length about the intersection of architecture and social impact. Follow-up coffee to discuss the arts center expansion? Tomorrow at Evergreen Cafe, 10 a.m.? Helena considered the message, a small smile playing at her lips. Not a date, or at least not explicitly so, but an opportunity. A beginning, perhaps. She typed her response. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. Setting down her phone, Helena moved to the windows and looked out at the city spread before her. The view was different here. The perspective changed. From this height, she could see further than she ever could from the house she'd shared with James. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Helena watched as the light transformed the urban landscape, illuminating new possibilities in the gathering dusk. She had survived the ending of one story. Now it was time to write another. On her own terms, with her own voice, in her own truth. She turned back to her half-unpacked apartment, rolled up her sleeves, and began to build her new life, one box at a time.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.